I'm so glad you're here. It is time to get ready to hear another one of God's stories. I wonder if we will see God's love or God's holiness or God's goodness in today's story. To hear a story from God's holy book, I close my mouth, just listen and look. After rescuing his people from slavery in Egypt and bringing them through the Red Sea, God led the Israelites deep into the desert. Day by day, God showed his people the way to go. He led them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Like a shepherd leading his sheep, the Lord went before them, guiding and directing them with each step, providing everything needed along the way. Manna in the morning, quails at night, water whenever they needed it. At first, the people were amazed at all that God had done for them, and they put their trust in him. But after a while, the Bible tells us that God's people began to grumble and complain. They forgot all their pain and suffering in Egypt, and they forgot all that God had done to rescue them. God's people grumbled and complained, saying, "It's hot. I'm thirsty. I'm hungry. I want to go back to Egypt. At least we had food there. This desert is terrible. I wish the Lord had killed us in Egypt. I don't think God knows what he is doing. I have a better idea. Let's go back to Egypt."
Moses, you're to blame for all this. Why did you bring us to this desert only to have us to die of starvation?
Moses said, "You are not grumbling against me, but against the Lord." And that is exactly what they were doing. They were grumbling against the Lord who loved them and had heard their cry and rescued them from their death and slavery and brought them to freedom here in the desert. You see, they still had the same big problem they'd had ever since Adam and Eve: sin. Their hearts were hard, they did not trust God, and so they grumbled and complained day and night. What did God do? Did he give up on these people? No. God continued to be faithful to them, and he led them deeper still into the desert where he was going to show them a new way to live, a better way, a holy way. And so, God brought them to Mount Sinai and gave them his good and holy and loving commandments, the 10 Commandments. Here is basically how it happened. After going up and down the mountain several times to talk to God, Moses gathered the people at the foot of the mountain. Then God called Moses up the mountain once again. God descended onto the mountain, and he appeared like a thick cloud so God's people could see he was there. He spoke like thunder and the blasting of trumpets so God's people could hear that he was there. God spoke these words: "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, who rescued you from slavery. Worship only me." God said to his people, and then he showed them how. God gave his people 10 commandments so they would remember who he was and who they were as his people. He wanted them to remember to worship only him. The people heard God's words and they trembled with fear. They pulled back and stood at a distance. When Moses came down from the mountain, they said to him, "We cannot bear it. You go talk to God for us, and we will listen to you instead." Moses said to them, "Do not be afraid. God has given these commandments to show you who he is so you may be like him and not sin." But the people kept their distance. Moses went up onto the mountain for 40 more days to hear more of God's instructions. And while Moses was up on the mountain, the people below grew impatient. They forgot all about God, the one true God, who loved them and rescued them and provided for them and blessed them. And they decided to go their own way. So instead of worshiping their great, powerful, strong, true, loving God, they had made a little fake, pretend, false God out of metal. They shaped it into a golden calf, just like the idols they had seen in Egypt, and they had all gathered around and worshipped it. Isn't that so, so sad? You see, even after hearing all about God's good way, the people decided they wanted to go their own way. They still had the same big problem Adam and Eve had: sin. What was God going to do with his people now? God had promised to make them his people, to bring them into a special land of their very own, and that they would live under his blessing with him. And God always keeps his promise. So, even when God's people forgot all about him, God still remembered his promises to them. He would continue to be with them and show them the way. And one day, God would send Jesus, the Savior, to rescue them from their sin once and for all.